Prime Minister has lost control of the borders, lost control of immigration, lost control of spending, debt, and inflation. Now he's lost control of his own cabinet. Yesterday, the Globe and Mail reported that there's a big fiscal feud that has broken out between the Prime Minister and his Finance Minister. At stake is that she wanted to run a gigantic $40 billion deficit, but that was her guardrail. And now this Prime Minister is pushing her through that guardrail and pushing all Canadians off the fiscal cliff. Why? Quote, Finance Minister, 2022, this is a line we shall not cross. Then she listed 3 lines. 1, that the deficit would only go down. It went up. 2, that she would pay off the COVID debt. Not only has she not paid off a penny, the debt has gone up. And 3, that the debt to GDP ratio would only drop, and it has risen. Did the Finance Minister voluntarily cross her own lines, or did the Prime Minister push her?
Today is another day of Trudeau being Trudeau. A couple interesting things to get into before we watch Question Period, House of Commons, etc., etc. Kamala Harris's presidential defeat was an attack on women's progress, Trudeau says.
Now, it shouldn't be that way. It wasn't supposed to be that way. We were supposed to be on a steady, if difficult sometimes, march towards progress. And yet, just a few weeks ago, the United States voted for a second time to not elect its first woman president. Everywhere, women's rights and women's progress is under attack, overtly and subtly. But I want you to know that I am, and always will be, a proud feminist. You will always have an ally in me and in my government.
Alrighty, so that's what Trudeau has to say about Donald Trump beating Kamala Harris in the presidential race. At the end of the day, the people decided. The American people voted, and it went Trump's way. And it didn't just go Trump's way a little bit, it went his way in an absolute landslide. So the idea that only men voted Trump, absolutely insane. There were tons of women backing Trump, bashing Kamala at the same time. As a matter of fact, the Democrats were so divided because Kamala was shoehorned in and Joe Biden was booted out based on his health declining, obviously. I mean, you saw some of those speeches he gave, they're pretty brutal. The point being, Kamala was far from fit to be president, and it shows while she is vice president right now. All the things she claimed she was going to do, she already had 4 years to do it. All the things Joe Biden did in the 4-year term, she claimed she wouldn't have changed a single thing or done anything differently, meaning you were going to get the exact same 4 years, but with Kamala as the president instead. The whole idea that this was an attack on women, when tons and tons of women specifically came out backing Trump, the Democrats said women who backed Trump were stupid. And they came out and the polls showed the exact opposite. Women voters came out in a very high percentage. People of color came out in a very high percentage. Blacks, Hispanics, Indians, whoever. They all came out in a very high percentage voting for Trump. He won in a landslide victory, and Trudeau he's coping. They didn't want Joe either. No, they didn't. No, they didn't want any of them. But the simple fact is, the Democrats were extremely divided over Kamala being shoehorned in. She was not fit to be there. She did not meet the credentials. She was literally the definition of a DEI hire. The Bank of Canada cuts rates by 50 BPS and says the economy is performing weaker than expected as unemployment rises. This is a lot different than what Justin Trudeau and Chrystia Freeland have been telling us. Looks like the Liberal government is full of shit again. No, not full of shit again. They have been full of shit the entire time. This is nothing new. Canadians have noticed this just from simply living. The writing's on the wall and has been for a very long time. And now we have the Bank of Canada themselves coming out and saying things are actually not looking too great.
Today, we lowered the policy interest rate by 50 basis points. This is our 5th consecutive decrease since June and brings our policy rate to 3.25%. Canada's economy grew by 1% in the third quarter, which was slower than we expected. Recent data also suggests growth will be lower than projected in the final quarter of this year. Canada's job market is still softening. Businesses have continued hiring, but the number of people looking for work has been increasing faster than the number of jobs. The unemployment rate rose to 6.8% in November. It has been especially hard for young people and newcomers to Canada to find work. While the upward and downward pressures on prices have been moderating, risks to the inflation outlook remain. We needed restrictive monetary policy to get inflation down. It's worked. Inflation's been around our 2% target since the summer. And against that background, the Governing Council agreed we no longer needed monetary policy that
Since
was
the summer, by the way.
Territory. And then the second element is, when you look at all the data,
That's not a long time.
it does tilt towards a softer economic outlook, a softer outlook for GDP growth than we published in October. As I said, Q3 growth has come out weaker than we expected. It looks like Q4 is going to be a bit weaker than we projected. Add in the fact that the government has lowered their immigration targets for next year. That's likely to pull GDP growth down next year, so we're not going to get it back. So you put that together, both of those factors really signaled that a 50 basis point cut made sense.
Senator Husakos.
Senator Gold, despite the significant financial burden the GST places on new homes and growing unaffordability of housing in Canada, your government, with the help of the Maserati Marxist Jagmeet Singh, voted against the Conservative motion to eliminate the GST on new homes under $1 million. How do you justify maintaining this tax while housing costs remain out of reach for so many Canadians? The Trudeau government has relegated a whole generation of young Canadians to living in the basement of their parents' home. This common-sense Conservative measure would allow Canadian homebuyers to save up to $50,000 and will spark construction of more than 30,000 homes and apartments across the country. And your Trudeau government voted against it. Why, Senator Gold?
Senator Gold.
Senator Husakos, as I stated before, and I'll take the opportunity to state it again, you are quoting only part of what is at issue in the housing issues. And indeed, your party has, your leader, who you follow so loyally, made a particular offer. What you have not mentioned, but which is in the public record, is his other statements to cut millions, if not billions of dollars of investments that this government has brought forward to stimulate and help housing in a whole suite of measures. You cannot, well, you can clearly do, quote selectively when it serves your purposes. The fact is, this government has invested seriously in a multitude of ways to address the housing question. The offer that your party made was not a serious offer and ignored all the programs that it would cut to the detriment of housing in Canada.
The Prime Minister, who is weak, lost control of immigration, has lost control of the borders, and lost control of spending, inflation, debt, and even his own ministers, according to the Globe and Mail. Tension is rising between the PM and the Minister of Finance on the tax cut, and it's compromising his commitment to keep the deficit to $40 billion, as the Minister of Finance promised. Why did the Prime Minister, why is he pushing his Finance Minister to break her promise on this inflationary deficit? The Right Honourable Prime Minister, Mr. Speaker, the Conservative leader likes to dramatize things, to distract Canadians from the fact that he voted against a tax break for Canadians. He voted against dental care, which has now reached 1.2 million Canadians. He voted against investment in school food programs, and he continues to try to muzzle his members to prevent them from talking in the interest of their communities, and he refuses to obtain his security clearance to be able to protect our democracy. That's
here we go with the security clearance again.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition, the Prime Minister, is the one who's trying to muzzle his own Minister of Finance. She made a promise to limit the deficit to $40 billion, to avoid further inflation, which is costing Canadians so much that they can't feed their children. And now he has forced his minister to break her promise. And he's attacking her in the papers. Why is the Prime Minister forcing his minister to break her promise and her credibility? The Right Honourable Prime Minister, as we've just seen, why the Conservative leader keeps on playing these dramatic games. It's because inflation is now at the level that is expected by the Bank of Canada, which has led to a cut in the key rate of 0.5 percentage points. And we are here to help Canadians. We have kept inflation down, but what they have done, they have voted against the school food program to help young people across our country. And he is blocking access to dental care. He is not here to help Canadians.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
This week, Prime Minister has lost control of the borders, lost control of immigration, lost control of spending, debt, and inflation. Now he's lost control of his own cabinet. Yesterday, the Globe and Mail reported that there's a big fiscal feud that has broken out between the Prime Minister and his Finance Minister. At stake is that she wanted to run a gigantic $40 billion deficit, but that was her guardrail. And now this Prime Minister is pushing her through that guardrail and pushing all Canadians off the fiscal cliff. Why?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Speaker, the Conservative leader likes to make up little dramas to try and distract Canadians from the fact that he voted against a tax break for all Canadians. He's trying to hide from the fact that he continues to muzzle his own MPs so they cannot be their community's voices in Ottawa, instead being his voice in forcing them to face billions of dollars in cuts to housing programs. He continues to refuse to get his security clearance because he doesn't want to keep his own MPs safe from foreign interference. That's why he's trying to distract Canadians from what's going on.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Muzzling, Mr. Speaker. His Liberal MPs are not speaking out against him because he's allowing so much liberty. It's because he's so weak. Right. And there's nothing worse than a weak bully. He's now cracking down on his own finance minister, some feminist. On this side of this house, I lead by inspiration while he leads by intimidation. Once again, why won't he follow my inspiration and stand up for the promise that he made to keep the deficit under $40 billion?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Once again, Mr. Speaker, we see very clearly for the Leader of the Opposition, it's all about him. Well, for us, Mr. Speaker, it's all about Canadians. It's all about giving Canadians a tax break over the next 2 months that the Conservative leader voted against. Right. It's about delivering dental care to 1.2 million Canadians, where 3 million Canadians are already approved to access dental care in the coming year. The fact is, Mr. Speaker, we continue to be there for Canadians. He continues to be there for himself to try and block the help we're delivering to Canadians to make sure everyone thinks everything is broken because he's busy breaking it.
Huh? Pierre's busy breaking it. What?
Order. Order. The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
He's been Prime Minister for 9 years. Let's review the chronology. So not even 8 months ago, his minister said the deficit would not exceed $40 billion, the guardrail. Then he went and got his banker friend, Carbon Tax Carney, to become his top economic advisor, stripping the power away from his finance minister. And suddenly, the guardrail was broken. Is he really going to subject his finance minister to the humiliation of reading Carney's fiscal update, which busts through the guardrail?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, this morning the Bank of Canada announced interest rates are going down yet again. That is terrible news for the Leader of the Opposition, but it's great news for Canadians for whom things will become more affordable. On top of that, a tax break out for Canadians over the next 2 months that the Leader of the Opposition voted against. Why, Mr. Speaker? Because he cares more about his own political interests than he does about Canadians who are struggling. Oh, he'll talk about the challenges Canadians are facing to try and instrumentalize them for his own gain, but he won't lift a finger to help Canadians.
I might start watching Senate question period as well, because at least they actually have conversations. It sounds like here it's just a bunch of whining and crying most of the time.
Let's just table the report.
A lot of the same things being repeated from over a month and a half ago.
Against Quebec's values, because Quebec is attached to, like most Western countries, to the notion of separating church and state. And I'm wondering what the Prime Minister, to the thousands of Muslims in Quebec who are happy and welcome in their society that has welcomed them. The Right Honourable Prime Minister. Mr. Speaker, on this side of the House, we have always defended and will always defend the freedom of ideas, freedom of expression, freedom of beliefs. This is a fundamental value for all Canadians and all those who come to Canada. And this is why on this side of the House, we'll always defend individual rights and the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms. This is clear, Mr. Speaker. The Honourable Member for Belleuil-Chambly. I'd like to make things a little bit more concrete, Mr. Speaker. Is the Prime Minister backing people who at schools, secular schools in Quebec, are imposing their religion? Is he backing those who are literally bullied because they want to respect the principle of secularism in Quebec schools? It's one or the other. Which one? The Right Honourable Prime Minister. Mr. Speaker, very clearly, we will always defend the freedom of religion, freedom of expression, which are fundamental values for all Canadians and Quebecers, and that is why we're moving forward to defend the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms. At the same time, Mr. Speaker, whether it's at independent universities or elsewhere, every institution has the responsibility of hiring the best possible professors and teachers based on merit, and that's what all Quebecers and Canadians expect.
The Honourable Member for Burnaby South.
Donald Trump is a bully, and bullies prey on weakness.
You're a bully.
When Trump says jump, the Prime Minister says how high. And when Trump trash talks Canada,
when the government says pension, Jagmeet says how much.
When Trump trolls Canada, hundreds and thousands of Canadians worry that they might lose their job. Why won't the Prime Minister fight back and protect Canadian jobs?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, the job of a Canadian Prime Minister is to stand up for Canadian jobs, for Canadian workers, the Canadian economy. That is exactly what we are doing with a level of serious and a level of focus and, quite frankly, a Team Canada approach that brings together, the Premiers brings together different actors from unions, from businesses, from expertise across the country. That is why we will continue to take this seriously, not freak out like the NDP or repeat the attacks like the Conservatives. We will stand up for Canadians like we have before, as we will again.
Repeat the attacks like the Conservatives? You've been asking Poilievre to get his security clearance for over a month and a half now.
Either, Mr. Speaker.
The Prime Minister is doing nothing while Trump mocks our country.
À l'ordre, s'il vous plaît.
Order, please.
L'honorable député.
The honourable member for Burnaby South. From the beginning, please.
Isn't safe either. Le Premier Ministre.
The Prime Minister is doing nothing while Trump mocks our country. And doing nothing while Trump threatens good Canadian jobs. I've fought bullies all my life. You have to be strong and not play their game. When will the Prime Minister stop showing weakness? The Right Honourable Prime Minister. Mr. Speaker, a few years ago, during the first Trump administration, when there were tariffs imposed on steel and aluminum workers across the country, we responded reasonably but firmly, and we saw these tariffs removed. We were able to renegotiate NAFTA by protecting not only supply management, but also things like cultural exemptions and the continuity of our trade between our two countries. We did so by taking challenges seriously, but we worked responsibly, and that's what we'll do once again.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Quote, Finance Minister, 2022. This is a line we shall not cross. Then she listed 3 lines. 1, that the deficit would only go down. It went up. 2, that she would pay off the COVID debt. Not only has she not paid off a penny, the debt has gone up. And 3, that the debt to GDP ratio would only drop, and it has risen. Did the Finance Minister voluntarily cross her own lines, or did the Prime Minister push her?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, the Leader of the Opposition is once again putting on his little dramatic acts because he is trying to distract Canadians from the core facts. Interest rates are down again. Canadians will be getting a tax break over the next 2 months, despite the best efforts of the Conservative leader, who once again, twice this past week, saw that this House has no confidence in him. And third, 3 million Canadians are now approved for access to dental care for the coming year. These are things that he stood against, but Canadians are getting anyway.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister is silencing his own finance minister. She was already wildly irresponsible with the public purse, but not irresponsible enough for him. She wanted to keep the deficit at an already massive $40 billion. He said it's not enough. Canadians are not paying enough inflation, according to him. So once again, did she voluntarily smash through her fiscal guardrail, or did he push her?
Yeah.
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, the Leader of the Opposition puts on these little performances because he wants to try and distract Canadians from the facts. We have the lowest deficit amongst G7 countries and will continue to. We are the 3rd largest receiver in the world of foreign direct investment, #1 per capita in the G20, because countries around the world and companies around the world have confidence, not just in Canada, but in Canadians. The question that people should ask is, why doesn't the Leader of the Opposition have confidence in Canada or confidence in Canadians?
We don't have confidence in you, buddy.
I know it's Wednesday and colleagues are very enthusiastic to participate, but I'd invite them not to take the floor unless recognized by the Speaker.
Colleagues,
The
please.
Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Canadians do not have confidence in him, nor does his own party or his own cabinet, nor apparently does the Bank of Canada, which today was forced into an emergency panicked rate cut to confront the collapsing economy. The governor of the bank said the economy is softer than he expected it would be, and despite the fact that inflation is rising, that all 4 measures of it are above the target, he's being forced to cut the rates to save the economy from outright collapse. When will the Prime Minister stop breaking the economy and call a carbon tax election so we can fix it?